Hey everyone, I'm Steve, and welcome to All Things Architecture, where every building tells a story. Be sure to like and subscribe so you never miss out on all things architecture. Now, with that out of the way, let's get to our story. In the hills above San Juan, Puerto Rico, lies the remains of a failed dream. A dream to redefine the apartment building. This is Habitat Puerto Rico, the ambitious follow-up to the first habitat in Canada, designed by architect Moshe Safdie. It was designed as a living blueprint of the future of affordable housing. Unfortunately, it never came to be. But while this version of Habitat failed, was the entire concept a failure? To answer this, we've got to go back and travel a few thousand miles north to Montreal, Canada, and back to the summer of 1967. An exciting time for the city as it played host to the last of the great World's Fairs, Expo 67. The Expo opened on April 27, 1967. By the end of the Expo, 50 million visitors would walk through its gates and bear witness to some of the most exciting and innovative ideas in architecture at the time. There was Buckminster Fuller's geodesic dome, the United States Pavilion, and Otto Frie's Germany Pavilion. For as impressive as those pavilions were, the one with the greatest impact would be the mountainous collage of boxes and terraces known as Habitat 67. The innovative housing complex began when Safdie was a student at McGill University. In 1959, he received a scholarship to study housing in North America. While on his travel, he saw the triumphs and failures of housing over the past 50 years. The lack of mobility in the suburbs and the lack of individuality in public housing were alarming to him. So for his thesis, he aimed to marry the best of suburban and urban living into one complex. Beyond that, he saw the possibilities of prefabrication as a way of building houses quicker and affordably. His thesis, titled A Case for City Living, did not center on a specific building, but rather on a broader building system that was centered around modules. These were uniform, prefabricated units that could be arranged to fit different sizes. This freedom of organization would allow for interesting arrangements, as well as give residents access to private terraces and gardens. The thesis garnered praise from his professors, especially from his thesis advisor, the architect Sandy Van Ginkel. However, it appeared that the thesis would remain on the shelf, as Safdie got a job working for the famed architect Louis Kahn. A year later, though, Safdie got a call from Ginkel. He invited him to join the team designing the master plan for Expo 67. Safdie agreed to join the team on one condition: the Expo build his thesis project. Much to his surprise, Ginkel agreed, and soon the 23-year-old architect was designing what could possibly be a revolutionary concept. But it wasn't going to be easy. As Safdie began translating his thesis into a working concept, his ambition grew exponentially. His original thesis had a vertical massing, with prefabricated modules fitted into a steel structure. The desired private terraces were achieved through voids in the structure. To attract attention and create a better pedestrian circulation for residents, the plan changed dramatically. The new design for Habitat was a vast 1,200 residential complex, complete with schools and shops. And all the residential units would be placed within a large concrete A-frame structure. To build such a building, a massive amount of money would be needed. When no private companies offered to sponsor the project, the Canadian government agreed, offering Safdie and his team $17 million, a significant downgrade from the envisioned $47 million. With budget cuts came a damper in the ambition. The project was scaled down from 1,200 residential units to a mere 158 units. The project, as it stood, could no longer support the community amenities that Safdie envisioned. He seriously considered walking away from the project entirely, but he knew that the project was a proof of concept, a proof that such a project was even possible. And he hoped that a developer would be inspired by the project and offer to either finish it or build a new one at a grander scale. And so the project went forward, even as government officials tried to take the funding away. The project went through countless models, including some made of Lego bricks, and drawing after drawing. Eventually, Safdie and his team created a 600 square foot module that was large enough to support its weight and the weight of the other units. They created a series of arrangements that allowed the modules to create private terraces for every unit, creating its main selling feature: for everyone, a garden. As construction began, critics emerged, seeing the unorthodox form as merely a novelty, and questioned the need for prefabrication. In the end, it was a race to get the building finished in time for Expo. When it opened with the Expo, Safdie was among the many new residents, getting a taste of future living. As Safdie lived, overlooking the Expo from his private garden in Habitat, on the ground, two developers, Fred Epstein and Heyman Elichar, were admiring the innovative structure, trying to see how the mammoth building was built. They were executives from the Development International Corporation. Though their reputation in the industry was that of a conservative one when it came to building, an opportunity working with the federal government in San Juan, Puerto Rico, gave them the confidence to try something radical. At the end of Expo 67, the two contacted Safdie, who at the time was working on several Habitat projects across America. Safdie met with the two developers and eventually added Puerto Rico as the site of the next Habitat. While Puerto Rico's Habitat shared many similarities with the other Habitat projects, mainly getting stuck in bureaucratic tape, Puerto Rico had the commitment of a large development company behind it, eager to push it forward. Design work for Habitat Puerto Rico began in early 1968. DIC had a site already selected, a large 20-acre site on the side of a 250-foot-high hill in the San Patricio neighborhood of San Juan. It would feature 800 prefabricated units clustered into units of 12, creating 264 residential units on the hillside, nearly doubling the number of units at the original Habitat. Beyond this, the DIC envisioned Habitat's prefabricated units being purchased by themselves as single or multifamily units elsewhere on the island. The first hurdle that Safdie had to overcome was the location of the factory to produce the modules. Unlike the Montreal site, the Puerto Rico site was too rugged, meaning that the factory would have to be elsewhere, and the units would have to be trucked to the site. This called for a complete redesign of the original modules. The new units would be reduced from 17 feet wide to 12 feet wide, which caused their own set of challenges. With the smaller modules, an entire residence could not fit within one unit, so Safdie devised a split-level design that would be parallel to each other on an incline. This provided its own set of challenges, though. There was not enough space for stairs to go between the two modules, so there needed to be a change in the shape of the module. Safdie and his team came up with an elongated hexagonal shape, with walls angled to match the pitch of the stairs. This allowed these modules to fit in perfectly, creating more spaces for residents and adding density. The promise of private terraces would also be retained. Plus, the updated design had a great futuristic look. Though some would criticize the development from a lack of context, there was a hint of it in the ways the modules and the units were clustered together. Safdie noticed in his research that the traditional Spanish house that dotted the landscape of Puerto Rico featured a central atrium with rooms on all sides. This was mimicked as various modules would be placed around a central court. The modules above would cantilever over to provide shading for it as well. An added benefit to this new design was it allowed for an easier circulation pattern for pedestrians. The original Habitat had long walkways and central elevator shafts that significantly raised the price of construction. But with the added density and placement of the modules, the site created natural walkways with only a few sets of stairs needed to connect levels of the development. In 1969, DIC was purchased by two other development companies, both committed to continuing the Habitat project. With money in hand, the start of construction was to begin any day now. That was until the Federal Housing Administration, which was subsidizing the project, published a report saying that the site's soil was not suitable for such a large project. A new site was found on the eastern side of San Juan. It was a similar landscape with great views of the city below, but the new site brought a change in plans. The project's ambition as with the original Habitat, was cut significantly, from 800 modules to 300 modules. The one benefit of the downsizing was the fact that the factory that would be prefabricating the modules could be built on site. Though disappointed, Safdie and the DIC were still committed to the project, and construction of the factory began in April 1970, with the construction of the modules beginning that June. Despite the proximity to the site from the factory, transporting the prefabricated modules was still a hassle, and costs started to rise. By the time construction was underway in Puerto Rico, Safdie's other Habitat projects were all shelved, placing the future of Habitat solely in the hills of San Juan. Even as Safdie questioned the slow progress, Fred Epstein assured him by saying that, quote, "I'll go as high as I have to go. I'm not going to take no for an answer." Except a no was taken. In 1973, the world was plunged into the oil crisis. The cost of construction rose, but worst of all, the federal government had pulled the plug on the 221 housing program, the program that subsidized the developers for constructing affordable housing. Without the government's financial help, the cost of building the experimental project was too much for the DIC to take. Work stopped on Habitat Puerto Rico that year, with only 30 modules constructed, half of which were placed on the hill overlooking the city. With that, Habitat Puerto Rico was now abandoned, and with it, the dreams of Habitat. You would think this would be the end of our story, but following the cancellation of all the other Habitat projects, including the one in Puerto Rico, Safdie's career continued to soar. His work spanned the globe, designing museums and airports. He gained the attention of the world yet again in 2010 with his Marina Bay Sands project in Singapore, with its defining rooftop deck and infinity pool. In 2018, the Canadian artist David Hart documented the ruins of Habitat Puerto Rico in a film titled In the Forest, which aimed to showcase the relationship between nature and architecture. And a year earlier, Safdie decided to revisit Habitat's concepts. He enlisted his firm to think of ways to update the ideas of Habitat. Gone would be the modular construction, but remaining would be the dedication to density and enhancing livability with open spaces. This updated approach to Habitat found a receptive audience in Asia. Here, urban living at a mega scale is a challenge, and Habitat seems to provide the answers. In recent years, Safdie's firm has designed and built new versions of Habitat throughout Asia, their Sky Habitat in Singapore, and the massive Habitat Qinghuandao, a project on par with the original vision of Habitat 67. In these new versions, we see the story of Habitat continues to be written. It has inspired countless architects over the years to think of the possibilities of apartment living. The fact that Habitat has remained a relevant idea close to 60 years now is a testament to the determination and vision of its architect, and proves that Habitat was not a failure, just ahead of its time. Thanks for watching. If you're interested in learning more about the ideas of Habitat, visit arcbydesign.com. And if you like this video, be sure to like and subscribe so you never miss out on an episode of All Things Architecture. Thanks again for watching. I'm Steve, and I'll see you next time with another edition of All Things Architecture, where every building tells a story.